Talks, an event series organized by Fresh Ventures Studio, this time in collaboration with Purpose and We Are Stewards. That is because today we'll dive into the why and the ways we can revolutionize ownership for impact entrepreneurship. I think a good and ambitious goal. For today, we have 4 people, experienced founders, all in steward-owned organizations or companies. We have Achim, who will kick off and will share sort of the basics, I would say, on what steward ownership is and why we need it, why it's relevant. We have Christian from WILDPLASTIC, Antti from Sharetribe, and Seadna, who is our financial lead, and will share more also on what Fresh is doing and how we structure ourselves and the ventures we intend to build. Before we get fully started, I think we have great speakers, but we also have a room full of, well, great people, interesting people. So what we wanted to do is to sort of check in on this moment and also on the people that we have here. That's why we will start with a very brief breakout, actually. In a moment, you will be automatically transferred to a smaller room with 4 to 5 people to get to know each other a little bit better. We ask you to answer 3 questions quite briefly. Who you are, why you are here, and what you are stewarding, or in other words, what purpose you are serving or what impact you're trying to make. I'm going to ask Huub to prepare for it, so don't be shocked. You're going to be transferred to a different room, then unmute and start a conversation. We will be there for 5 minutes, so let's keep it brief. But I will be an example here for the group. My name is Bart van der Zande. I'm one of the co-founders of Fresh Ventures Studio. I'm here today to host, obviously, but more importantly, I think to facilitate a joint learning experience on steward ownership with a group of great people. What I steward is Fresh and my personal mission to transform the food system by building the ecosystems, the connections, the ventures, and the mindsets to start regenerating ourselves, the natural ecosystems of which we are a part of. That's what I'm trying to steward. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Huub, if you're ready to go, I suggest let's break out, and I'll see you back in 5. Welcome, welcome. All right, I think everybody is back again. Not sure if I can. Hello, everyone. I was muted for a bit. I think I'm back now. We can get started, I think, with the rest of the program. I briefly introduced the speakers already, and we kick off with Achim. Achim is one of the co-founders of the Purpose Foundation, the Purpose Economy. Sorry, Huub, we're going to do the poll first, right? I forgot.
Yep.
We gotta briefly get to know 4 to 5 people. It's still a small group, but because we don't get to physically meet, we want to get a bit better feeling of the rest of the crowd. So Huub will actually do a very, very quick poll that you can answer in Zoom to get a little bit of an idea of what kind of people we have. So if you can quickly answer those questions. The first one: what do you consider yourself most if you are intending to start a new business? And would you consider structuring your next venture or current organization according to steward ownership principles, which we are obviously discussing today? Answers are coming in. A lot of entrepreneurs, as it seems, and quite a few people who are intending to start a new business. Around 50% of the group. And as for the steward ownership, I think there's, we could say, quite some interest. 2 people don't want to start a next organization steward owned, and the rest mainly needs more information. So let's get to it, I would say, with that information. These are the results, I think. So Achim Hansen, he is one of the co-founders of Purpose, as I said. Purpose is an organization that I think is the thought leader when it comes to steward ownership, at least in Europe, probably in the world. Also a prominent investor themselves, and active campaigners in bringing new types of ownership into the mainstream, also on the legal side. I'm also proud that Achim is closely involved with us, with Fresh Ventures, as one of the core investors, and I think he's the right guy to take us along and share us about steward ownership. So Achim, if you're ready, please start.
I am ready. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to some facts about steward ownership. Yeah, I was asked to talk about the history and the idea and the benefits of steward ownership. And I was asked to not take more than 10 minutes, which is a pretty challenging task to do. First, because steward ownership is a bit of a complicated topic. And second, steward ownership is very close to my heart. So I do like to speak about it. I'll really try my best and keep it to 10 minutes. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, please scream if you cannot see my screen. Otherwise, I'll
you can see it.
Keep going. Perfect. We founded Purpose 6 years ago, and I think a pretty good way to talk about steward ownership is just to take you on a journey with me and let you be part of what we learned since we started 6 years ago, and kind of make you part of our learning journey as well. Oh, I can't really. Yep, there we go. This is where we started. We, as the founding team of Purpose, started with a question and something we wondered about, because we thought about, are there any pioneers in the world who think ownership in a healthy way? We wondered, is there a healthy way to structure ownership of businesses? And what do we mean with healthy? We mean healthy for collaboration, healthy for the planet, healthy for people, healthy for the business. And we started our journey just to look for companies that we would be inspired by. And as we did that, first we found companies that we weren't really inspired by. We found companies where the owners really enjoyed the fruits of the work, but they weren't really connected to the companies anymore. We named them absentee owners. We met companies who just got sold, where a lot of people worked for something and then suddenly they had new owners and didn't really know why. We came across companies where the ownership of companies didn't even really belong to people anymore, but it was just part of a computer program where shares of companies, so ownership of companies, just got traded from one person to another in nanoseconds. That was not really what we started for, what we looked for. And there was good news, because we did came across some pioneers of healthy ownership structures. And one of them is this guy. This is Ernst Abbe. He was the owner of Carl Zeiss. Zeiss is the company that produces those microscopes. A lot of you would probably know that, or have parts of that company in your mobile phones. The other guy is this guy, who's called Robert Bosch, the founder of Bosch. Again, a company probably a lot of you know or use products from. And we came across those, what I would call great pioneers of healthy ownership structures. And we looked at what they did. And I want to talk a little bit about what Robert Bosch did with his company. He had the problem that he looked for oops, sorry, I'm clicking too much here. He looked for a succession structure. He knew that he wanted to find a structure that would live longer than he did. And he had two problems. He didn't want to give that to the family, because he learned that a lot of companies kind of got destroyed while the family fights over them. And the second kind of prominent option, to just sell the company to the highest bidder, was something that he wouldn't do either, because he just didn't want people to mainly be motivated by money taking over the company, and that being the reason why they take over the company. So he somehow had to look for a new way. And this is what he did. Let me just quickly jump back to one slide I just glossed over, because if you talk about ownership structures, you have to answer one question at the very beginning. You have to answer the question, what is ownership? And that's very important for the talk that we are having today. Ownership consists out of three main rights. It's the dividend rights, the right to take profits. It's the voting right. That's the right to control the company or the property. And it's the right to pass on the company or destroy the company. And a lot of people just think those rights as a bundle of rights, and they just consider ownership to be all those three. But what Robert Bosch understood is that you could actually tear those rights of ownership apart and reconstruct them in a way that really fits your kind of perspective on what ownership and what companies should be and are. Let me go back to Mr. Bosch, because what he did is he took the voting power of Robert Bosch and put that into one entity where the stewards can decide what happens with Robert Bosch, and he took the dividend rights and put that in another entity. By doing that, he made sure that the people who are deciding about the fate and the future of Bosch are not mainly incentivized by maximizing profits, but really have the core of the mission of Robert Bosch in their heart and in their actions while they decide. The structure still exists like that today. They cannot change that structure. And this structure makes sure that whenever Robert Bosch distributes profits, that goes to a charitable foundation. But the main kind of principle behind that is that profits get reinvested or reinvested into new ideas. Only if there is enough to distribute, they give that to a charitable cause. The good news is we did not only find those two old white men, Ernst Abbe and Robert Bosch. We did find a lot of other companies who somehow find similar ways than those two. And we wondered what are the connecting principles behind those companies. And we came across two principles that are very important. The first principle of all those companies is self-governance. They all made sure within their ownership structure that the majority of the voting rights are held within the company by people who are closely connected to the mission. The second principle all those companies somehow enshrined in their legal DNA is a purpose asset log. What does that mean? They made sure that the majority of the profits are reinvested in the business or are donated. And now, very interesting, I would say the most important aspect comes. They didn't only did a kind of values workshop and put that on the wall somewhere. No, they found ways to enshrine those principles in the legal DNA and make them non-changeable. So they gave a commitment and a legally binding promise about those two principles. We nowadays call this the combination of those two principles with a legally binding promise, steward ownership. And you could ask, okay, what is so great about this? Is that not just the most boring idea? Is that not just a kind of a new legal form, a little bit of different shareholder agreements? And I would argue it's not just a little bit of a new legal form. It fundamentally changes the way that power gets distributed. And I think this question about how and why people get power over companies is a very critical one today to ask. And let me dive into that a little bit deeper. Today we have two main principles how power over companies gets distributed. The first one is money. If you put enough money on the table, you get power over companies. The second one is what Warren Buffett calls the lottery of sperms. If you get born into the right family, and you have the right blood, you get power over companies. And what steward ownership does, if you implement that in a coherent and legally binding way, it adds a new way of how power gets distributed. It doesn't ask for money, it doesn't ask for blood, but it looks for ability and value aligned people who take over the stewardship of companies. Okay, the next question people ask us is, okay, that's great, but that doesn't work, right? Like economies tell us you need to have the incentivization of money for people to get up in the morning, be motivated. That doesn't work. If money doesn't equal power, why would people do that? Happily, we found a lot of studies, especially from Denmark, where those companies are pretty well researched. And we found that not only do they perform equally good, they even perform better on a lot of very interesting metrics. First, they have a higher survival probability over the midterm. And second, they have a lot of other nice benefits. They pay higher wages. They have higher employee retention. The managers stay longer. We do not have concentration of wealth that much. They can focus more on environment. The intrinsic motivation of employees is higher. So we kind of like, we were convinced anyways, but when we found those research results, we were even more convinced. And we wondered, why are there not more companies like that? Why do people run around in Berlin or in Amsterdam talking about the exit? Why do they talk about when to sell their companies? Why do they not run around and talk about building some companies that will be the next Bosch, the next Zeiss, the next Novo Nordisk? And I think there are three reasons for that. The first one is people don't know about this concept of company ownership. People lacking the language to even talk about that. Second, even if they know that and they want to implement that, there are no easy solutions to do that. Robert Bosch took 20 years and 40 lawyers to come up with his double foundation structure that would enshrine that in a legally binding way. And third, even if I understood that, found a way to do that, I still need access to suitable capital that is aligned with those principles. There are good ways to do that, but I need access to a good market of capital to do that, to start the companies this way. That's exactly what Purpose made their mission, or we made our mission. We do field building to create knowledge. We support companies to transform to steward ownership, and more importantly, find legal hacks to implement it in a very easy way that doesn't take 20 years and 40 lawyers. And we create a network of investors who are willing to invest in a coherent way with the principles of steward ownership, which mainly means they do not take power by putting money on the table, and they, one way or the other, somehow cap their upside to make sure that at one point, when the capital cost is done, all the profits of the company can serve the purpose of the company. I want to just end with one example how you could hack a structure to build in steward ownership in a pretty easy way. This will just take 1 minute more. Every one of you guys who owns a company or wants to start a company can implement the two structures in their shareholder agreement. That's very easy. I can forward templates to you and you can just put those principles in there. That's not the complicated part. The complicated part is, how do you implement them in a way that you cannot change it again next week? Because that's the legally binding promise steward-owned companies want to do. What do? We create a shareholders agreement with the principles in it. We take 99% of the voting power, give that to the founders, to the employees, whoever, and we take 1% and give that to a foundation, for example, the Purpose Foundation, and that's a golden share veto right. And whenever you want to change the structures of steward ownership, you need 100% of the voting power to kick it out again. And the Purpose Foundation, for example, as a golden shareholder, has only one job. We always say no to changing those structures. This way, we create a legally binding hack in the given systems that enables startups or mid-sized businesses to implement that in a very efficient way. But having said that, the way better way would be to have official legal forms in the given jurisdiction to do that with an official legal form. That's what we fight for in Germany. And that's what I think is needed. But till then, that's a pretty good way to do that. You can find structures for investors as well. I'll not dive into that. I'll just end on, I do not think that this is just another legal form. I do think when you coherently ask the question, like, what is a company for you? And you answer that in a way to say, a company is mainly a group of people working for a purpose together, then you need a coherent legal dress to do that. And if you manage to do that, I want to quote Fridtjof Bergmann here to end. He says, the fact that people, when given a choice, want to work with a purpose represents a social energy equivalent of a steam engine. And if that turns out to be true, then you can rethink much else about our culture. And I think that's the potential of steward ownership.
Thank you. The applause is a little bit difficult, but I think there's a mental applause from a lot of people, and I see a few hands going. So that's good. Thank you very much, Achim. We have a few questions coming in via the chat. We have 3 more speakers. After that, we do a Q&A, but I'll do one now, and then we'll probably get into a few later. Someone is asking also for the slides. We're going to share this, the thing we're doing after this, so you will be able to look at the slides. I will ask Liliana Dominguez. She was one of the first. Liliana, maybe unmute and ask your question to Achim.
Good. Oh, yes,
yeah,
it's working.
Now we can hear
Sorry. Hello,
Hi.
Achim.
Hi.
Thank you so
Nice to
much
meet
for
you.
your exposition and the work you've been doing, which is great because it's not an easy thing. I've always been looking for different models to run the business that I'm implementing. So my question is, I'm based in Portugal, and here you just only have two models legally, basically, normal company and associations. I would like to know where, if someplace, at least in Europe, where me from Portugal can implement an organization officially and legally with this kind of model. If there's places in Europe that fulfill it better than here in Portugal.
Yeah, good question. It really depends on the jurisdiction and the kind of history of the law in those jurisdictions. I know that Portugal, Spain, Italy have a little bit of a complicated history where it's very tricky to separate voting shares and dividend shares. It's pretty good. We can do that in Finland, Germany, Switzerland, but we are working on finding solutions in every jurisdiction, and we have created a workbook for lawyers who enables them to find solutions in the given jurisdiction, because in the end, we want to make that accessible everywhere. But again, we have done it in the US and Finland, Germany, Chile, and a couple of other countries. So that I gotta give that question back to you. Which of those might be feasible for you to do that?
Okay, it's a question to look at better now, but thank you.
And please reach out, and we try to share everything we have in Portugal to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll get into a few more questions after the three following speakers, because I think they will give some additional depth as well. Also good to know, we will follow up this email with a bunch of resources as well that can help get a more in-depth insight. But for now, I would like to introduce you to Christian. Christian is the co-founder and CEO of WILDPLASTIC. It's a steward-owned company that has been established in 2019 in response to our global plastic crisis. He has also been a part of Entrepreneur First in Berlin, and he previously worked for Google and YouTube. He will share his personal story, what they do, and how they structured their organization. So I would say give it up for, but please, Christian, if you can start your presentation, then.
Perfect. Bart, thank you so much for the intro. Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Yeah, I've already had a great introductory round at the beginning, and I'm looking forward to hear much more from everyone, what you think about steward ownership. But first of all, let me talk a bit about my journey and WILDPLASTIC's journey. And as Bart already mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of WILDPLASTIC, a company based in Hamburg. And we are on a mission to solve one of the biggest and probably most known problems that we face globally, which is the plastic crisis. And if you look at this graph, it is pretty simple to see that we have become addicted to a material that we produce for over 5 decades now. Plastic is everywhere on this planet, and where there is production, there is waste. If you think about the fact that almost 80% of plastic waste has neither been recycled nor incinerated, so basically is just out there in the environment, in illegal landfills, in the streets, in the ocean, at the beaches, etc. This is not only a visible, but a substantial problem for all of us. Plastic breaks down, harms people, planet, plants, animals, and we don't only want to look at the problem, but also at what we can change. And one thing we can basically rethink is that plastic is not only a problem, but can also be a solution, because some plastic parts can be recycled, some plastic types can be recovered. And this is exactly what we try to do at WILDPLASTIC. We are recovering the world's wild plastic and making useful circular products from it. One is the wild bag, a trash bag for your home, for your office, for your for wherever you are. And it basically represents the idea that trash is not only something that destructive and negative, but we can turn it into something regenerative and positive, because each and every product that we build and make recovers plastic, improves people's lives, and saves CO2 emissions because we stop the production of virgin plastic instead. And so the mission that we're on as a company is to establish a new and global supply chain for wild plastic. And we don't do this alone. I believe in strong partnerships. So we work with organizations across the globe, one being the Plastic Bank, which operates in Haiti, Indonesia, Egypt, and Brazil. And they basically help us to recover, source, sort, collect, and then recycle the wild plastic to make it into new products. To make it a bit more specific, one of the problems that we encountered is that many countries across the globe rely on water sachets or water pouches as a way to provide clean drinking water. And these water pouches are made from LDPE plastic, which is a type of foil plastic. Once it has been consumed and there is no infrastructure to discard the plastic, which is unluckily the case in most countries, then eventually it will end up in the environment. And this is one of the plastic streams that we look at very specifically and think, well, if we can recover this type of plastic, it can eventually become something like a trash bag, a shipping bag, and many other things. And so basically the thought from trash to treasure is our guiding principle that we try to operate around each and every day. And you can already hear that wild plastic was not born because we saw a huge opportunity, but more because we saw a problem initially. And we've been seeing this problem not only for a year or two, but more for a decade or two in our society. The group of people that I co-founded the company with, we all are from different backgrounds and have done different things in our lives, but one thing unites us, and that is the belief that this problem can be turned into partly a solution. And we believe that positive entrepreneurship, so basically a sustainable company that lasts for not only years, but decades, can hopefully be a driver towards a regenerative economy and a solution. And if you think about starting a company that addresses a problem like plastic waste, you immediately think about the way how this company should be set up to serve this purpose and to address this problem over decades. Because if you looked at the graph and the acceleration of the plastic production, it is clear that we won't solve this problem within years, but more within decades. And so I, as one of the co-founders, wanted to make sure that we put the problem and the purpose into the center of our mission and into the DNA of our company. Because many companies just look at the time span of 3 to 5 years or 3 to 10 years. They want to solve the problem, they make an exit, and they're gone. And I believe this won't work for plastic waste nor wild plastic. So we looked at different ways of doing just that and came across the purpose economy and Achim and his team, and they helped us to structure Wild Plastic as a purpose company that is self-owned, that is essentially, that gave away 1% of our voting rights, of our shares to the Purpose Foundation, and they make sure that Wild Plastic operates within the 2 principles that Achim explained. It belongs to itself and the profits are reinvested into the purpose. And I believe this is one of the key elements of sustainable entrepreneurship, because it enables us to really keep a long-term focus, to be authentic with ourselves and to reflect our beliefs in the structure of the company. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we came into this, we actually embarked on this journey with different values and beliefs, and they must be reflected in the way that we operate and that we build this company. And I think optimizing this company for purpose and impact has been the one thing that we all wanted to make sure when we established WILDPLASTIC. And setting up the company in a steward-owned way is one of the major elements that allows us to do just that. And I believe we can't do this alone. We can't solve this problem alone. We need partners to come onto this journey. And we need partners that also protect the mission and the vision of WILDPLASTIC. And one of the partners that we are working with is Otto, one of the biggest e-commerce retailers in Europe and in Germany. And we've just announced a collaboration with this company. And typically, I believe we probably would have sold a part of WILDPLASTIC to Otto in order to build a good partnership here. But not so in our case. We have basically rethought what a partnership like this can look like. And it doesn't need to involve selling a part of your company to another partner or an investor or whoever that is. But I think there are many, many other ways and many facets in how we can build investments, how we can build partnerships, and how we can build companies. And if I think about the key lessons that I took away from the process of WILDPLASTIC, it is that if you manifest your beliefs, your values, and the things that you want to see in a future economy in the company that you're building, it increases your odds. Because in all the conversations that I have in the WILDPLASTIC universe, whether it's with our employees, with partners, with investors, I think it strengthens our case. It strengthens the case that we want to solve the plastic problem, and this is our main and the main focus and the main thing we want to work on. And because of that, I believe steward ownership is not only a nice element to have, but more a crucial element to focus on when you establish a young company that is focused on social impact. So this was a quick rundown of WILDPLASTIC and steward ownership in our company. And back to you, Bart.
Thank you, Christian. Great, great introduction. I'll skip the questions for now, and because we got quite a few questions also during your talk. But we'll do that after. I will immediately move on actually to Antti. Antti is the co-founder and COO of Sharetribe. They are on a mission to democratize platform ownership. And for me there, I've seen them always as a prominent steward-owned organization as well, mainly because during the crowdfunding campaign they did in 2018, they also opened up their documentation. So next to inspiration, it helped also by actually seeing how they structured it and in documentation. So thanks for that also, Antti. And please start your presentation and share your story with us.
All right. Thank you, Bart. Hello, everyone. Nice to be talking here. As said, my name is Antti, and I will briefly introduce what Sharetribe does, why we shifted to steward ownership, and what we have, some of the key lessons so far. So in a nutshell, Sharetribe helps entrepreneurs and organizations to build their own sharing economy platforms. In other words, helps people to run their online marketplaces without diving deep into software development. And I show a few examples as that probably gives easiest the idea. So our clients have built, for example, a marketplace where local people can offer the gardening services to others, or a marketplace for indigenous art in the USA, where the people creating the crafts can directly sell them, or a place to find therapeutists and other help, or Airbnb style service for booking swimming pools in France, or IT security experts in Australia. So all kinds of services, rentals, or object selling marketplaces can be created with Sharetribe. And it's already powering more than 1,000 marketplaces around the world. And our mission is to democratize the ownership of the platforms and the platform economy, because these days it looks a little bit like dominated by a handful of Silicon Valley-based venture-funded giants. And our method of democratizing it is to building tools and guidance, making it affordable and accessible for anyone to start their own platforms. So the field could look a little different. And as an example, the taxi drivers of one city could create their own cooperative and start their own platform without raising huge amount of capital, as they can use Sharetribe tools, and then they can share the profits among the drivers more without the huge pressure of that often comes, the profit pressure that often comes with the venture investments. As we've seen the side effects that the big companies raising a lot of money, selling a lot of the decision-making power outside the company, often can't take action on all the negative side effects that might be following from that profit-seeking action. When we were doing this, we were, for example, talking in conferences like a platform co-op meeting in the US and some similar places. And there came up a good question that what prevents us, the Sharetribe company, from becoming one of the venture-funded giants that sells the decision-making power outside and starts to squeeze out all the possible money from these platforms. And at the time, we didn't have a great answer, but we started looking at that, and we knew that we need to raise more funding, and that was close to reach the tipping point of selling majority of the voting shares to the investors. And once we found a steward ownership model, we met with purpose and quite quickly recognized that, hey, this is a model that we want to follow. It was very much aligned with how we want to do things. And we shifted our model in 2008, so 3 years ago. And now we have a system that we can fully give a binding promise to all the stakeholders that we will never sell out the principles and the purpose. Because in practice, this means that the voting rights are now held only by the active team members. So basically, I'm going partially through the same principles that Achim presented, but probably good repetition. And practically, at least in our structure, this means that the company or the majority of the voting can't be sold outside or taken public, which obviously also limits the exit possibilities, or makes it so that we are not striving for a traditional exit. And we are also not striving to profit maximization, because the profit distribution and salaries are capped. So the people holding the ultimate decision-making power can't divert all the money streams to their own pocket when the capped returns of the capital are reached. And this structure is made permanent with the foundation structure, just like Achim explained. And quickly highlighting a few of the learnings so far. There are pros and cons. On the negative side, we have a little bit less options on certain fields. And one important one is the funding sources. So venture capital mathematicians don't see us as a good investment target with this model. And some angels were not interested at all. But then on the other hand, we found several angel investors that participated in our funding round in 2008, which consisted of some funds, including Purpose Ventures, some angel investors, and a lot of crowd. So we got over 400 shareholders in that investment round, and a bit over 1 million euros of funding. So there are still funding options for us as well. Same goes with the compensation tools for employees or board members. We used to have the stock option thing, but we are like transitioning to more salary-based options there, or systems. So we have, again, options, but a little bit more limited in those, some traditional things that some people might be looking for. And the payoff of the entrepreneurs also is limited. So with everybody, investors, entrepreneurs, employees, we set the limit to the capital gains. But that brings a lot of positive, this puts in the legal system that the purpose is always going before the profit. Now we can give the binding promise, we cannot change it back. And this has been very well received by the stakeholders. We control our destiny. The voting power is not outside the company. And now the incentives of founders and investors are aligned. So we don't need to argue when to sell the company or not, because we all know that the payback comes only through profitable business. And I think this is a great way to be the change that we want to see and nudge the capitalism to the direction that feels very right. So for us, the pros clearly outweigh the cons. And we've been very happy with the transition for the 3 years now that we've been sailing with the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Antti, again. Big applause in words for you. We'll continue with the Q&A after. We're going to the final speaker of the day, my fellow founder, Seadna Quigley. He is the CFO of Fresh Ventures Studio and the financial director of Metabolic, one of the founding organizations of Fresh Ventures Studio. And he will share a little bit more about what we actually do and how we interact with steward ownership. So Seadna, take it away.
Thanks, Bart. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to meet you. And thanks also for the previous speakers. They were very interesting presentations. My name is Seadna Quigley. And as Bart mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders at Fresh. And I'm also CFO at Metabolic, which is one of the founding companies in Fresh. And in the coming 5 minutes, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about how we're approaching steward ownership at Fresh Ventures Studio. Although to start, I'm also going to tell you a little bit about what Fresh Ventures is. So we are a mission-driven organization. We're on a mission to accelerate the transition to a regenerative and circular food system. And we're doing that through a startup studio model. So we basically build ventures. In the coming 3 years, we want to build 10 mission-driven ventures in the space of circular and regenerative agriculture. And we want to do that through an annual kind of 4-month pre-studio program, whereby we take 30 to 40 highly talented entrepreneurs, and we, in a 4-month process, we bring them together, build teams, and then at the end of those 4 months, 2 to 4 of those teams will get seed funding from one of our core investors, according to Steward Ownership. And those ventures, those 2 to 4 ventures, will enter into our startup studio, the Fresh Studio, where for 12 to 36 months, they will incubate with us, looking for product market fit and attracting follow-on funding. So why are we applying steward ownership? Simply because the world needs more mission-driven ventures, and that a lot of the prevalent kind of conventional financing and corporate governance structures are, they can be at odds with entrepreneurs, the ambitions of entrepreneurs to build mission-driven ventures. There are 2 things in particular that we struggled with a lot for ourselves as Fresh, trying to set up a mission-driven organization, but also as thinking about the kind of ventures that we want to build. And what we found is that kind of traditional equity-based, exit-focused equity instruments, they created these this growth imperative and these excessive return expectations that were at odds, or could be at odds at least, with the purpose of the venture. So too much profit focus versus the mission focus. And they also tend to give investors too much control over the company, which could also be at odds with the kind of the ambition or the desire of these really mission-driven founders to steer the company towards achieving its mission or the purpose, rather than maximizing revenues or growth so that investors could create exits. How we're doing this at Fresh specifically. So Achim and others have already spoken a little bit to it. The key thing is to kind of split out the different functions of ownership into, and we're doing that in a slightly more nuanced way. So we're splitting up our share classes into 4 separate share classes, 2 of which have voting rights and 2 of which do not, but they have economic rights. So we're using a golden share model, whereby there is one golden share that is held by an independent foundation with an independent board that has a veto right over the kind of the mission critical decisions of the company. And then there are the B shares, the steward shares, as we're calling them, which can only be held by natural persons, so not by other companies, who are actively involved in the day-to-day management of the company. So in the beginning, of course, this will be the founders, but also founding employees, and later maybe it can be more broadly held by people who are actively engaged in the company. And these 2 shares do not have any dividend rights. So there's no dividend rights or economic rights, and they can't be bought or sold. But they do have all together, they have all the decision-making rights of the company. Then there are the founder shares, which are non-voting rights, which are held by the founders. And they are to kind of compensate our founders for the early stage risk that they go through and the kind of the opportunity cost of setting up a mission-driven venture. These have a capped return. So once the venture is able to pay out, there's revenues, there's maybe profits, and there's free cash flow, then these shares are bought back so that the founders that we work with, they do have some kind of upside as well, because we of course think that's really important. And then Class D shares, which are really kind of earmarked for our external investors in the ventures, and these also have a capped return. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. They have a capped return that are also payable from revenues or free cash flows or gross profits. And once this predetermined return has been achieved, these shares, just like the founder shares, they automatically are dissolved. So that's the venture that has been set up is entirely independent again. One of the key challenges, and it's already been touched upon a little bit, that we found is this need to kind of stay attractive for investors, even though they have much less kind of rights. So they have less voting rights, they have capped returns. So how do you still stay attractive to investors? And one of the tools that we found that really aligns very well with steward ownership is the concept of revenue-based financing. So I already mentioned a little bit that we have these capped returns. At Fresh, we're thinking of a capped return of 4.3x the initial investment. So if an investor puts in 100K, over time they can earn at most 430K. And these returns, rather than being earned through an exit in a next funding round, they are paid from either revenues or gross profit or free cash flow as and when the company is able to pay it and as it grows. So that the kind of the returns of the investors are really closely aligned with the interests of the venture. We're currently, just my last slide, we're currently recruiting these 30 to 40 founders that in November we want to start building these 2 to 4 ventures with. So if you're interested, please do get in touch. If you do join us and you found a company with us, you, as a steward-owned company that you're going to found, there's a slight difference in what you kind of, the rights you get. So rather than just getting 80, 90% or 100% of the common stock, you will get 2 different types of shares. You will get the steward shares, which give you the decision-making rights, and Fresh will also, as a co-founder, initially get some of those rights to kind of steer the company as it matures, but these will be dissolved relatively quickly as the company becomes independent, and you will receive founder shares that kind of compensate for this early stage risk. There's a hanging sentence there, but so this was a very short overview of what Fresh does and why and how we're implementing steward ownership. If you do have any questions, please do get in touch at the email or me personally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shayna. I love it. Great story, loved it.
Made within 5 minutes.
And in 5 minutes, so that's great. Yeah, I'm gonna open up the stage for some questions. So we already got a bunch, but if you're still sitting on one, feel free to add them to the chat. I'm going to start off with quite a practical question coming from Umit. Umit, maybe you can unmute and ask your question on the time and investment and budget involved. Umit, are you still there?
Yes, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, basically, I really love the idea. And my question is, if a pre-existing organization decided to adapt this structure, how much time and budget we need to be prepared so we would have a successful transition to adopt the best practices for such a frame?
Yeah, I thought maybe Achim, you can have a general response, and maybe Christian or and maybe Antti, because you transitioned, you can share a little bit of your experience personally. If you could start in general.
Yeah, a very good question. I'm afraid it's not super easy to answer because it really depends on where you are in the world and how good the legal jurisdiction in your surrounding is to implement steward ownership. It really varies if you're, for example, in the US, where the best option is using a perpetual purpose trust, or you're in Germany, where the golden share model works pretty well. And the other factor is I helped companies to transform, and they took a year, not because it was so complicated of the structure, because thinking about ownership can become a deeply personal, very cultural, and deep process. And it takes time to do that. But having said that, I had cases where companies came to us and said, we want to do that. We understand everything. We have the legal templates, and we were done in 2 weeks, and it cost them around 1,000 to 2,000 euros plus some fees for the notary.
But once
maybe Antti, you can add to that.
For the adoption, I understand maybe it is related with the location and the rules. But let's say you overcome all those challenges through the adoption with your help or with some other consultant.
Yep.
Once you adopt it, I understand it is going to be in your operational procedure, but on top of your regular operations, how much time investment is recommended for a healthy ongoing operation? Because there are lots of additional decision making. Instead of a smaller committee making the decision, now you are more democratic in the decision making process, and it would require additional time.
I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding that I'm used to. Steward ownership does not necessarily mean that the ownership becomes more democratic in a decentralized way. Steward ownership mainly means that you make sure that the voting power stays within the company and the profits serve the purpose. And we do observe a lot of companies who, on top of that, build more decentralized structures where they tend to draw in more people who can be part of the voting power. But we do see some companies where the voting power stays with 2 people for a long time, because the whole culture and the company thinks that's the best way. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it automatically leads to more democratic ways of doing that. The other ongoing cost is very little. There's a little bit of an administration fee for holding that 1% golden share, which we set for, like, the companies can decide how much they can contribute. Small companies pay nothing, big companies pay more. Other than that, there's not much ongoing cost. Scream if it's different, if you could perceive that different, Christian and Antti.
And maybe Antti, you can respond.
Quickly add, I would also say that the ongoing cost, there is no major difference. And in our case also, there is actually less people holding voting shares now than there were beforehand, because now we have like 400 investors, but they don't have votes. So in that sense, it's less democratic, which we actually don't like. So we are trying to spread it more among the employees, but we haven't yet fully figured out how to do that and how to do the transfer regarding the tax things in Finland. But otherwise, we did figure out how to do the things in Finland. So in 2018, and there we spent quite many thousands on the lawyer costs, because we didn't have an example in this jurisdiction in Finland, but we followed like a German example. So now somebody else doing it in the Finnish system would be getting much faster through that. And the timeline, I think we learned about purpose maybe in November 2017. Then in the winter, there was discussing with them, our previous investors, with our team. So as Achim said, thinking about, is this a change we want to do? And then when we decided, that was maybe January, February, and we did the fundraising and the change maybe April, May. So in a couple of months, things happened, even being the first one in Finland doing this. So there's some data of what I remember.
All right, I think we touched upon a few questions actually. So Hannes was asking if purpose is paid for holding the golden share. I think Achim answered that it's a small amount. Shayna also already told that we are working, for example, setting up our own foundation and our own structure to hold that right. But I wanted to give the stage to Sarah D. and maybe
Bart, can I just quickly say something about this veto share to add on to just to make sure it's understood? The goal of steward ownership is not that golden shares are held in all companies. It's just one way to implement steward ownership. You can use foundation, you can do, even come up with new ways, or as I said, create a legal form that officially creates those principles. It's not about those golden shares. It's about finding a structure. And something that is important for me as well, we wanted to come up in a way where it's made sure that the golden share can be given to someone else if someone doesn't like the connection to purpose. The only necessity is that they find an equally safe structure, and then they can actually take back the veto share and give that to someone else. And the whole Purpose Foundation is controlled by an entrepreneur council that consists of all the companies that use the service. So it is kind of a self-governing system, which is important for me because I don't want to no one at Purpose Foundation wants to be that foundation who holds veto shares in like all the companies. That's not our goal. Quite differently then.
Yeah, thank you, Achim. Maybe briefly, you can raise your hand. Gijsbert Koren, he's active in the Netherlands as well for We Are Stewards, partly organizing this event as well. And Gijsbert, you've set up also a foundation where people can work with, right?
Hey, Gijsbert.
Hey, Achim. Hi, everyone. Yeah, and I would like to second what Achim said. We basically founded this foundation because a specific Dutch company that wanted to transition to steward ownership insisted on having a Dutch foundation that would hold a golden share. But I agree with Achim, it's not necessarily the way to go. It's just a possible solution. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Gijsbert. Sarah, I would like to give you, you asked a question as well about distribution, and maybe Christian, you can answer that later on, but Sarah, if you can ask it.
Yeah, my question actually was both on the distribution of shares to the employees and also to understand if this model of ownership for you, is it thought to fit with teal or holacratic organization or not that much? And yeah, just to understand actually because you talked about impact inside and best collaboration inside the company, and that's also an important part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sarah. So I'm going to answer the first part, which is about distribution of power within the company. And to be honest, this is not necessarily connected to steward ownership, but this more depends on how you want to structure your company in general. So there are steward-owned companies that have one person that decides it all and that holds all the voting shares. And then there's other companies that basically say, well, everyone should be should have voting rights and therefore build a structure like this. From my point of view, I see a tendency that it is rather distributed among more people rather than less people, because usually, you know, reinventing organizations nowadays doesn't only include ownership, but also other facets of how you build organizations in general. And but it's not connected. And we decided at WILDPLASTIC that the founders are the first people to hold voting rights. But I personally believe some of these founders are going to give up their voting rights because maybe they do something else in their lives, and then others are going to step in because they basically carry the responsibility and and they grow into the role of an entrepreneur. So, but this is up to you how you structure your company.
I can jump in for the teal part, yeah. Because that really interests me. My background before I started Purpose is organizational development and working in that field of what you now call new work. I think there is a very direct connection to teal and new work. First, Frédéric Laloux, who kind of coined the term teal, he himself writes in his book, there's a difficult relationship between teal organizations and mainstream ownership. And what he means by that the mainstream ownership is just a quality of ownership. He would say it doesn't help to just distribute the same quality. You got to change the quality. And I do not think that necessarily decentralizing is the answer, but changing the quality. And we are happy enough to have Frédéric as an advisor in that steward ownership movement. And I do think there is, every new work concept is about purpose and self-determination. That's the core principles that keep repeating, either in holacracy, teal, or whatever. So yes, you gotta definitely look at your ownership structures if you go that path, I think. And you will eventually, if you do it in a coherent way.
Thank you, Achim. Sharam Yalda has been raising his hand for quite a while, so I feel like you get a tired hand. Not sure what your question is yet, but maybe you can share your question and see who would be able to answer it.
Yes, thank you very much. I was very keen, as you can see, because I was very excited to meet you all. And I think I mean, I've been in touch with you, Achim, through LinkedIn. And also we did a talk with Business Models Innovation, where Marilena and Maike were there. Marilena. So it was very nice. Yeah. So we got to learn a bit about your model. And my question really is, I mean, what you're doing with specific companies is excellent. And I think that, I mean, essentially, you know, this point is that capitalism in itself is not the problem. It's the best way that we've democratized since the feudal system, you know, so it's been a wonderful way of democratizing the system. The problem is the way ownership has concentrated wealth in the hands of the 1%, the top 5, you know, billionaires now, controlling policy, controlling the Food and Agriculture Organization, controlling the World Trade Organization. Everything is just in the hands of so few people. And the World Health Organization, importantly now with COVID. So I think this democracy has been completely undermined now, and it all boils down to company ownership, which is what you guys are tackling. So the biggest problem today, the biggest social problem, which is wealth inequality, you are tackling, you know, because it's all at the heart of how company ownership and structure is created. Absolutely. So this is fundamental. So for me, it's about because we're trying to develop an ecosystem that exactly does this kind of incubator model where companies come through, but they don't want to do an exit. So we call it a regenerative slow accelerator, because we think we have to accelerate to the slow because we don't have time, and we have to accelerate in a slow way because we believe in the slow culture. So we're trying to do this model. And for us, this is at the heart of how organization should be. So we want to see how we can work together. Maybe
ask you as well to move to the question, because we have a limited amount of time.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think it is inspiring to hear your story as well, but maybe move on with the question.
That's it. I mean, just the question basically is, you work with specific companies. My question is, how can we work as an ecosystem to bring this to Spain, with Portugal, with Croatia that we're working with Berlin. We have a lot of contacts, but you're already there. So we want to see how we can create this network of bringing impact investment into an ecosystem similar to, you know, Silicon Valley, but obviously a different, complete way, a more distributed way. So how can we join forces and create the ecosystem together?
Yep. Thank you for your point of view, by the way. I think you phrased it pretty well. That's something that Purpose is trying to get better at, because we now created so much momentum, and to bring together all those initiatives like Fresh Ventures. I mean, I think it's just amazing that there is a company builder that focuses around steward ownership. What you just talked about is amazing. And bringing together those initiatives in a better way, and creating ways where we can learn from each other. And that's what Gijsbert and we do as well. Like Gijsbert is really trying to push things in the Netherlands, and we try to create places where we can learn from each other. And I will make the promise that the part that we can play in this, we will try to make better, because it's a bit of a step to become this, to create this space where international collaboration and learning can take place, and do that in a, I don't know, coherent and good way. It's not a small challenge, and we feel that, but happy for any input, feedback, or wishes that we can contribute to it anyways.
Okay, so I'll be in touch about sharing that responsibility. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sharam. I personally have a bunch of questions still also from our founders, but it's getting a little late. So I would like to at least round it off, and people who want to stick around and continue the conversation for a few more minutes, you can do. So first I want to ask Huub how we to do the poll again, but only the final question, and maybe we see some changes. So please, if you could answer the poll, then I hope Huub wrote down the earlier scores. We have.
Huub did not. Huub apologizes.
I do know that maybe it was 48% and now it's 23. And we had 2 people that didn't want to, that wasn't considering structuring a next venture as a steward ownership, and now we have 0. So I think that's a big compliment to all the speakers today in bringing a little bit more clarity, but also inspiring some people. Still facing some challenges, as I see. I think we will, and I can say this as well from Fresh Venture Studio. You heard a little bit about that from Shayna, but our goal is really to build multiple steward-owned companies every year. We are also on a journey on understanding how we can best adapt this concept. So it's quite a mission, which we really hope you join us on. And we do that during this year as well. So we probably have a few more Q&As or moments you can check in with us to discuss how to best implement steward ownership. If you like this mission, and I see a few thumbs up and hearts popping up in people's screens, so that should be good. If you like our mission and you want to support us or maybe even join us, I would really invite you to look at our website, www.freshventures.eu, because we are currently looking for participants in our program, ambitious, mission-driven founders with grit that really want to start a steward-owned company. So if you know someone like that, or you even are someone like that, please do apply and get in touch with us. One last thing I wanted to say is that we will follow up this meeting as well. So we will share this meeting back to you guys. And in this, we will, well, Shane actually wrote a nice blog about the subject as well. I will share that, but we will share some other resources as well that we liked on steward ownership to help you learn more beyond this thing. Part of that is also Gijsbert, one of the partners in the Netherlands. So for people in the Netherlands, we'll make sure that you get the contacts of Gijsbert as well if you want to work on steward ownership here in the Netherlands. I think that is it for now. I will share my screen one more time because then I can show you the actual, this is coming up for us. Maybe if you want to join us again, we will have a Q&A very much on the program next week. And then the 2nd of June and the 3rd of June, we'll dive into the food space, which we are actually trying to transform. So more on that subject, and we'll be back on this subject as well. So thanks to all the speakers. That was great. And for everyone who wants to stick around, please stick around. But the big thing is over now. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I can stick around another 10 minutes if there are more questions.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah, so please, if you have more questions, and there were quite a few questions, I think, maybe use the raise your hand thing or add your question to the chat. I can start with one question I still wanted to ask, and that is because we were talking, and Antti, you touched upon the investors and aligning the interests, opening doors closed and doors getting open. Do you have tips on how to have the discussion with investors as well, how to get in the right conversation? And I wanted to ask Christian and Achim as well, maybe Shane as well, what we have learned in talking to investors about steward ownership, how to make this a constructive conversation. Would you like to start, Antti?
I can start. Maybe a few points that come to mind. As we transitioned from a venture-funded model, there was some discussions with existing investors and then with the new ones. And with existing, naturally changing to a capped return model and not striving for an exit was quite different what they expected. So that required coming up with a solution that kind of, because they were funds, we needed to have an arrangement that for them made sense in terms of how they manage their funds. So we need to think about the venture funding model at the same time, and when formulating the upcoming investment round, so that we could get the other angle of investors who are happy with the profit-based payback and a bit longer payback times, etc. And to keep it short, with the old investors, by Christian. With the old investors, we found a model that because they also understood that the founders' motivations were very much on this path. So it was about finding the financially sustainable way to do the transition. And we agreed that in the upcoming fundraising, if we raise enough, we can also allow them a partial exit. That then also happened. So they are still in with the same rules now as the new investors, but they also got some exit already. So that made it kind of sensible from their fund point of view. So this is to say for people that if you started with the venture path already and you want to switch, it is possible, but requires a negotiation, finding common solutions. And then the other point about the new investors, we found out that talking with angel investors, we found several that were excited about the new model, like trying to improve the ownership structure and the capitalism in some sense, because they also see the many angel investors see the problems of the seeking of eternal growth. Maybe venture investors see as well, but as they're managing other people's funds, their hands might be a little bit more tied. So talking to angel investors, finding people who are excited to be part of the change, that was a good thing, at least for us. Cool.
Yeah, maybe Shayna, you can add to that as well. But I think it's a similar lesson we have had so far. But maybe what is your experience in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we haven't come across any investors for whom this was a real struggle. We had to sometimes have a few extra conversations just for them to understand. But I think a lot of the investors that we've spoken to really did understand quite quickly. It's not rocket science. It's just a different way of doing things. But because it also frees you up in a way to really think and talk at the level of the mission and at the a very inspiring level. And that, I guess when you're fundraising, you always have to think very hard about what is the investor that's going to fit with your company. And you also, when you go fundraising for a steward-owned company, I think you also, what are the companies that will understand our purpose and get on board with that, and therefore also understand why we're doing steward ownership and work with you to see how that can fit within their own working methods. And yeah, it was in our own experience, it's always been very, very constructive conversations. There's always a bit of conversation about what does that mean for them, where because they have very understandable concerns about what kind of influence can they have. It's obviously limited, but it can't be here's some money and speak in 7 years' time. And also investors want to know how, because they also see it as their core, especially early stage investors, as their role to really increase the success rate of ventures. They have a lot of experience, they have a lot of network, there's a lot of things that they can do to help the company, and steward ownership shouldn't kind of disclude that option. So I think but it just fundamentally kind of becomes a different type of conversation, which is really really nice, actually.
Maybe from our perspective to add to that, I mean the Dutch word is aandeelhouder, which feels also more like stakeholder and someone that is actually involved. And we got into conversations, especially with impact investors and really mission-driven investors, but we want to be involved with your mission, and potentially feeling excluded by if you press too much on, we're gonna not give you any power because investors are the evil. I don't think that is true at all. I think that is a big part of the conversation, really doing it together as well, and finding a good balance there, and not just. Sometimes it seems like it's a sort of anti-investor thing, but I really don't think that is the case, and you should do it together and have them involved in a good way. Maybe Achim, you want to add to that, or Gijsbert?
Yeah, I'm happy to add my 2 cents. It's interesting. There's so much you could say about that. I wanted to say one very practical thing. I think what Antti and Joho did really well with Sharetribe is, in a personal way, they just kind of said, that's what we want to do. That is how we want to build our business. And they wanted for the investors to get a fair return. They did not want to like cut them or anything. They wanted to them to get a fair return for the risk they take. But they said, hey guys, this is the way how we want to build our business. Can you be part of this? And that was so powerful to just do that and involve them in the conversation and then find a way how to do that. I really like that. And I always kind of name them as an example how to do that. That's the very concrete part. The more abstract part is, I think the whole relationship changes. If you really want to like have a relationship built on trust where you add value to a company, you don't need formal power to do that. Every investor who needs formal power to add value to a company, I don't think that's a very good way to add value to a company. And I saw whole investor groups changing by what happens with steward ownership, because the conversation really focuses on what's good for the company. Should we even take out money too early? Should we even put in more money because maybe that's not so much money that is needed, etc. It's really interesting what that does to relationships. And the third one, and then I'm finished, is I think steward ownership meets another tendency and another problem, which is somehow we move to a world where we think venture capital should and has been invented to be the one way to finance companies. And I think this is just wrong. It should have never, venture capital should have never become the one way how to finance companies. It's very good for a very limited amount of companies, but there are probably 90% of companies who look for diversity, who are very diverse companies with very diverse business models. So we need a diverse system to answer that need. And there's a lot of stuff between bootstrapping and VC, and I think that's happening anyways. This tendency, this movement and this tendency, and it's good.
Anyone got to add to this? I think it's a great, Achim, you maybe Antti or Gijsbert, and if not, I want to give the turn to Sarah, who has raised her hand.
Yeah, maybe a final thought is that especially independent investors, I guess, so investors that were entrepreneurs and that invest with their own money, they have the freedom to do this, right? So, well, it might seem obvious, but yeah, I think it's worthwhile to focus when you're fundraising on those and on the ones that already did invest in a steward-owned company.
Sarah.
Thanks for accepting again a question from me. My question was maybe rather for Seadna, and it was more about the targeted return you expect for your company, and actually, if any. And the question being, so first, do you target a return? Are you in a command and control mode or more a living system mode with a purpose, but not focusing on predictability? And if you have, but then it's hard to raise money, I guess. And otherwise, do you have a target return, and which one? If you have any. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, though. I think we definitely do, and we've had a lot of conversations with our investors. So we have a group of 4 kind of core investors who are earmarking capital to invest like seed money into the ventures that we build. And so we're looking at what we've discussed up to now is kind of like at least 100K seed capital, whereby it's as I described. Based on revenue-based financing, whereby rather than this exit after 5 or 6 years to sell out, you really kind of the returns, they grow with the company's like financial success. We're looking to cap the investment at 4.3x, which we kind of using financial models and just kind of hashing it out, that within 7 years, so if we say that the investment wants the investors want their returns within 7 years, that would lead to quite a competitive internal rate and return and return on investment. And we also think that after 7 years, a company should be able to pay 430K or whatever the return is. And otherwise, there's also the opportunity to get follow-on funding that could kind of be used to refinance, as it were, if this is necessary. So it's just more of a kind of a backstop option that we're thinking about. But this is how we're thinking about it now. I think it's also important to consider that we're obviously going to build 10 ventures in 3 years. Some of them might be a software company which is going to grow really, really fast and be able to pay that back very quickly. Others might be a hardware company that needs huge capital investments in the beginning, but then and takes a longer time. So we have a blueprint, but not a completely strict model. And we also want, of course, to give our investors some say in this, and it needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to fit what the company is going to be. So we have blueprints and we have ideas, but and kind of templates, but the devil is going to be in the details, of course. And yeah.
Great. I think I actually also need to move because there will be, I think, some other event where I'm at right now. But as I said, we're going to continue the conversation in different places, shapes, and forms as well. So please stay involved with us and some of the other organizations pushing this as well to stay updated. And I would also like to be conscious of Achim's and Antti's and Shayna's and all of your time. So I think we're going to close the room now, and hopefully we'll talk soon again because we can talk for hours, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, boss. Good to see you.